Chapter 6. The blessed bullet found its mark. Sarah squeezed the trigger and watched the silver projectile tear through Donovan's massive shoulder, sending the Iron Wolf Alpha crashing into the side of her barn. The impact shook the old structure, and for a moment, the only sound in the farmyard was the werewolf's howl of pain and rage. Then chaos erupted. Donovan's pack surged forward, snarling and shifting, but stopped when their alpha roared at them to stay back. The challenge laws were sacred, no interference allowed, even if their leader was bleeding silver onto the frozen ground. Sarah felt a surge of savage satisfaction through the blood bond with Marcus. His strength was returning rapidly now, the hunter blood in her system neutralizing the last traces of silver poisoning. She could sense his amazement at her natural shooting ability, his fierce pride in her courage. But underneath it all, she felt something else, a strange resonance like an echo of recognition when she looked at Jake in his captor's arms. "Lucky shot," Donovan snarled, pulling himself upright. The blessed bullet had torn through muscle and sinew, but hadn't hit anything vital. Silver blood dripped from the wound, sizzling where it hit the snow. "The first of 6, Sarah replied, surprised by the steadiness of her own voice. The hunter instincts were fully awake now, flooding her system with knowledge she'd never learned but somehow possessed. Donovan's laugh was pained but genuine. "You've got balls, Hunter. I'll give you that. But one lucky shot doesn't make you my equal." He came at her then, moving with the terrifying speed of an alpha werewolf despite his wound. Sarah dove to the side, rolling behind her truck as massive claws raked the air where she'd been standing. The bond with Marcus flared, and suddenly she could see Donovan's attack pattern through his eyes. The slight favor of his wounded shoulder, the tell in his stance before he lunged. Information flooded through their connection, tactical knowledge born of years fighting supernatural creatures. Sarah came up firing, putting another blessed bullet into Donovan's thigh. He stumbled but kept coming, and she realized with growing dread that even wounded, he was faster than any human had a right to be. She was buying time, nothing more. And time was what Marcus needed. Through their bond, she felt his strength surging back, felt the silver poison finally clearing from his system. But she also felt something else, a deeper connection forming, memories and emotions bleeding between them in ways that left her dizzy. Flashes of images. Marcus as a younger man, standing beside someone who looked almost identical to him. Brothers, fighting side by side. Then grief, terrible and fresh, as that same brother fell to enemy claws. And underneath it all, a face that made Sarah's world tilt on its axis. Tommy's face. But not Tommy, younger, wilder, with the same dark hair and stubborn jaw that Jake had inherited. The realization hit her like a physical blow. Through the bond, she felt Marcus's shock as the same memory surfaced in his mind. The night his brother had died, the human woman he'd been seeing, the child Marcus had never known existed. Jake wasn't Tommy Martinez's son. He was David Kellerman's, Marcus's nephew. The distraction nearly cost her life. Donovan's claws raked across her ribs, tearing through her jacket and drawing blood. The pain snapped her back to the present, to the very real threat of the werewolf alpha trying to kill her. "Losing focus, Hunter?" Donovan taunted, circling her like a predator. "Thinking about that sweet little boy we're going to train to hunt his own kind." Sarah fired again, clipping his ear. The blessed silver made him howl, but he kept coming. 3 bullets left. Through the bond, she felt Marcus struggling to his feet inside the house, felt his desperate need to come to her aid warring with the knowledge that revealing his recovery too soon would ruin their only advantage. "Hold on," his voice whispered in her mind, clear as if he'd spoken aloud. "Just hold on a little longer." But Sarah's world was reeling from the revelation about Jake's parentage. Every memory of her marriage was reshaping itself. Tommy's sudden interest in moving to the middle of nowhere, his nervousness around certain topics, the way he'd always seemed to be running from something. He'd known. Tommy had known Jake wasn't his biological son, and he'd married her anyway. Protected them both anyway. "Such a pretty family," Donovan was saying, stalking closer. "The boy has strong bloodlines. Iron Wolf and Death's Head, mixed with hunter heritage. He'll make a fine weapon when we're done with him." Something cold settled in Sarah's chest. Not fear, something harder, more dangerous. The hunter blood in her veins responded to the threat against her child with predatory intensity. "Over my dead body," she said quietly. "That can be arranged," Donovan lunged. Sarah waited until the last possible second, then rolled forward instead of away. The move put her inside his reach, close enough to press the revolver against his chest and pull the trigger. The blessed bullet tore through his heart. Donovan's eyes went wide with shock and pain. He staggered backward, silver blood pouring from the wound, and for a moment Sarah thought she'd actually killed him. Then he smiled, showing fangs stained with his own blood. "Alpha werewolves," he gasped. "Don't die that easy." Before Sarah could react, his massive hand closed around her throat. She felt her feet leave the ground as he lifted her effortlessly, his claws pressing just hard enough to draw blood. "But humans do," he finished. The farmhouse door exploded outward. Marcus emerged in full werewolf form, moving with fluid power that made Donovan look slow by comparison. The silver poisoning was gone, the blood bond having cleansed his system completely. He was magnificent and terrible, 8 feet of muscle and fury with eyes that burned like golden fire. Donovan dropped Sarah and spun to face this new threat, but he was wounded and surprised. Marcus hit him like a freight train, and they went down in a tangle of claws and fangs. The two alphas rolled across the snow, their battle shaking the ground. Sarah scrambled backward, clutching the revolver with its 2 remaining blessed bullets. Around the yard, both packs watched in tense silence as their leaders fought for dominance. But Sarah's attention was caught by movement near the Iron Wolves' bikes. The 2 werewolves holding Jake were backing away from the fight, clearly planning to disappear with their prize while everyone else was distracted. Hunter instincts flared, and Sarah moved without conscious thought. She sprinted across the yard, using the chaos of the alpha battle as cover. The Iron Wolves didn't see her coming until she pressed the revolver against the larger one's skull. "Let him go," she said quietly. The werewolf holding Jake snarled, but his companion raised his hands slowly. "Easy, Hunter. No need for anyone else to die tonight." "There's every need," Sarah replied. "That's my son you're holding." "Your son?" The werewolf looked confused. But the alpha said, "Let him go." Jake broke free and ran to her, throwing his small arms around her waist. Sarah kept the gun trained on the Iron Wolves while she checked him for injuries, relief flooding through her when she found only bruises. "Mama," Jake whispered, "the bad wolves smell wrong. Sick. Like they eat things they shouldn't." Even now, even traumatized and frightened, her gifted son was analyzing supernatural threats. Sarah pulled him closer, protective instincts warring with the terrible knowledge that he carried werewolf blood. Marcus's blood. The battle between the alphas was ending. Marcus stood over Donovan's prone form, his massive jaws clamped around the Iron Wolf's throat in a position of dominance. Not killing, yet, but making the terms of surrender clear. Donovan shifted back to human form, gasping and bloody. "I yield," he said, the words torn from his throat. "Territory rights to the Death's Head." Marcus released him and stepped back, also shifting to human form. Naked and covered in blood, he still radiated the authority of a victorious alpha. "Take your pack and go," he said, his voice carrying across the silent farmyard. "Return to Iron Wolf territory and don't come back. This challenge is settled." The Iron Wolves began mounting their motorcycles, their earlier confidence replaced by sullen defeat. Donovan climbed onto his bike with visible effort, the blessed bullet wounds still bleeding silver. "This isn't over, Ghost," he called out as his engine roared to life. "The hunter blood changes everything. The other packs will hear about this, about what she is, what the boy is." "Let them hear," Marcus replied. "And let them remember what happens to those who threaten what's mine." The Iron Wolves thundered away into the night, their taillights disappearing into the darkness. Sarah watched them go, Jake still clinging to her waist, and tried to process everything that had changed in the span of a few hours. Marcus approached slowly, pulling on clothes that Razor had brought from the house. Now that the immediate danger was past, the weight of the revelations was settling between them like a physical barrier. "Sarah," he said quietly, "about what you saw in the bond." "Not now," she said, not trusting herself to look at him. "Not with Jake here." But Jake was looking up at Marcus with new understanding, his gifted senses picking up on things that would have been invisible to normal children. "You smell like pack," he said to Marcus. Like family." The innocent words hit Sarah like a blow. Marcus's expression went carefully neutral, but she could feel his emotions through their bond. Wonder, grief, and a fierce protective love that mirrored her own feelings for Jake. Before anyone could respond, the sound of vehicles approaching cut through the night air. But these weren't motorcycles, these were cars moving fast and in formation. Elena appeared on the porch, her face grim. "They're here," she called out. "Who's here?" Sarah demanded. "The society," Elena replied. "Gabriel must have felt the blood bond forming. He's brought other hunters." Sarah's heart sank as she counted the headlights. at least a dozen vehicles, moving with military precision. The Blackwater pack might be gone, but a new threat was arriving. Marcus's pack formed defensive positions around the farmhouse, but Sarah could feel their exhaustion through her bond with their alpha. They'd been fighting for hours, and now they faced fresh enemies with weapons specifically designed to kill werewolves. "How many?" Marcus asked Elena. "Enough," she replied grimly. "Gabriel's been planning this for months. He has hunters from 3 different bloodlines, all armed with blessed weapons." The lead vehicle, a black SUV that looked more like a military transport than a civilian car, pulled into the farmyard. Sarah watched a man emerge who looked enough like her to be a brother. Gabriel Martinez was tall and lean with their family's dark hair and eyes, but where Elena carried herself with dignity, Gabriel radiated cold fanaticism. Behind him came a dozen other hunters, all armed with weapons that gleamed with silver blessing. They moved with the controlled precision of soldiers, taking positions that would give them clear fields of fire. "Sarah Martinez," Gabriel called out, his voice carrying the authority of someone used to being obeyed. "Step away from the creatures. You're coming with us." "Like hell I am," Sarah replied, pulling Jake behind her. Gabriel's expression hardened. "You've been compromised. Blood bonded to a werewolf, seduced by their lies. The corruption has to be cleansed before it spreads." "The only corruption here is yours," Elena said, stepping down from the porch. "You've broken society law, Gabriel. Unauthorized kills, rogue operations." "The society is weak," Gabriel spat. "They've forgotten what we are, what we're meant to do. These creatures aren't meant to coexist with humanity. They're meant to be destroyed." Sarah felt Marcus tense beside her, felt his pack's readiness for violence through their bond. But she also felt something else, his growing realization of what Jake's heritage meant, what it would mean to other werewolves and hunters alike. A child with werewolf and hunter blood was unprecedented, dangerous to both communities in ways that neither side fully understood. "The boy comes with us," Gabriel continued. "His training begins now, before the werewolf corruption can take hold." "No," Sarah said simply. Gabriel raised his weapon, a rifle that gleamed with silver blessing. "This isn't a negotiation, cousin. You've betrayed everything our family stands for. But the boy can still be saved." "Jake is my son," Sarah said, feeling the weight of the revolver in her hand. 2 blessed bullets left. "Jake is an abomination," Gabriel replied. "Half werewolf, half hunter. Do you understand what that means? What he could become if we don't act now." Through the bond, Sarah felt Marcus's shock at Gabriel's words. The hunter knew. Somehow, Gabriel had figured out Jake's true parentage. "How?" Marcus asked, his voice deadly quiet. Gabriel's smile was cold. "The same way I tracked the blood bond. The same way I knew exactly where to find you. I've been watching the Death's Head pack for years, waiting for the right moment to strike. When my cousin's husband started asking questions about supernatural bloodlines, I knew he'd found something." The pieces fell into place with horrible clarity. Gabriel hadn't just killed Tommy to protect Hunter secrets. He'd killed him because Tommy had discovered Jake's true father. "You murdered him," Sarah whispered. "I eliminated a threat," Gabriel corrected. "Just as I'm going to eliminate this entire pack of monsters. Starting with your werewolf lover." The hunters raised their weapons, silver blessing gleaming in the moonlight. Marcus's pack tensed for a fight they couldn't win. Not against blessed weapons, not when they were already exhausted. Sarah stepped forward, placing herself between the two groups. The blood bond with Marcus flared, and she felt his desperate love, his willingness to die for her and Jake. But she also felt something else, his growing understanding that Jake represented something new, something that could change the supernatural world forever. "There's another way," she said, her voice carrying across the tense silence. "A way that doesn't end with everyone dead." Gabriel's rifle never wavered. "The only way this ends is with werewolf blood on the ground." "Then you'll have to go through me first," Sarah said, raising her own weapon. "And I still have 2 blessed bullets left." The standoff stretched out under the hunter's moon, 2 bloodlines facing off over the life of a child who belonged to both and neither. In the distance, thunder rumbled, promising more storms to come. But Sarah stood her ground, protecting the family she'd chosen and the man she'd blood-bonded herself to, ready to fight a war she'd never asked for but couldn't walk away from. The supernatural world was about to change forever, and it would all center on a 5-year-old boy who could sense werewolves and carried the blood of both hunters and pack. Chapter 7. The tribunal convened at dawn in Sarah's own barn. She sat on a hay bale between 2 groups that wanted to tear each other apart, her children flanked by Elena on one side and Marcus on the other. The blessed revolver lay heavy in her lap, 1 bullet left, and 12 hunters plus 50 werewolves to choose from if things went wrong. Gabriel Martinez stood before the makeshift court like a prosecuting attorney, his silver-blessed rifle cradled in his arms with casual familiarity. Behind him, 11 other hunters formed a semicircle, their weapons trained on Marcus's pack with deadly precision. Sarah Elena Martinez, Gabriel intoned, his voice carrying the formal weight of centuries-old law. You stand accused of blood bonding with a supernatural creature, of consorting with enemies of humanity, and of corrupting the hunter bloodline through forbidden magic. This is bullshit, Sarah said flatly. I saved a man's life. You saved a monster's life, corrected a woman hunter Sarah didn't recognize. She was older than Gabriel, with steel-gray hair and scars that spoke of decades fighting supernatural threats. And in doing so, you've compromised 4 generations of Martinez hunter purity. Elena stood slowly, her age showing in the careful way she rose. The girl acted to protect her child. That is a mother's right, not a crime. The child is the problem, Gabriel snapped. Look at him, Aunt Elena. Really look at him. All eyes turned to Jake, who was pressed against Sarah's side with wide, frightened eyes. But even in his fear, Sarah could see what Gabriel meant. Jake was changing, not physically, not yet, but something in his scent, in the way he held himself. The werewolf blood that had been dormant his entire life was stirring. He's manifesting, Gabriel continued. Werewolf traits awakening under stress. In a few more days, maybe hours, he'll be lost to the beast forever. He's 5 years old, Sarah snarled. He's a baby. He's an abomination, replied the scarred hunter. Half-breed children never survive the transition intact. Their minds fracture, torn between human consciousness and wolf instinct. They become something worse than either species, mindless killing machines. Through the blood bond, Sarah felt Marcus's grief and terror. She could sense memories of other half-breeds he'd known, children who'd died screaming as their dual nature tore them apart from the inside. But she could also sense something else, his absolute certainty that Jake was different, stronger, more stable than any half-breed had a right to be. The boy lives, Marcus said quietly, his voice carrying the authority of an alpha. That's not negotiable. One of his own pack members, a young man Sarah knew only as Torch, stepped forward with obvious reluctance. Alpha, with respect, the hunters are right about one thing. Half-breeds are dangerous. To themselves and everyone around them. Are you questioning my judgment? Marcus's voice dropped to a dangerous growl. I'm questioning your priorities, Torch replied, and Sarah could hear the pain in his voice. You're risking the entire pack for one human family. The Iron Wolves nearly destroyed us because you were weakened by silver poisoning. Now the hunters want war because you blood-bonded with their kin. How many of us have to die before you remember that your duty is to the pack first? Murmurs of agreement rippled through the Death's Head wolves. Sarah felt Marcus's anguish through their bond. The impossible choice between his responsibilities as alpha and his love for her and the children. The pack has a right to question leadership that puts them at risk, said Kane, Marcus's lieutenant. His voice was carefully neutral, but Sarah could hear the criticism underneath. Perhaps it's time to consider whether the alpha's judgment has been compromised. Compromised by what? Marcus demanded. By mating instincts, Kane replied bluntly. You've claimed the hunter woman as your mate, Alpha. That changes everything. Your priorities, your decision-making, your ability to put pack welfare above personal desire. The word mate hit the assembled groups like a bomb. Sarah felt heat flood her cheeks. But through the bond she could sense Marcus's fierce possessiveness, his absolute certainty that she belonged to him just as he belonged to her. I haven't claimed anyone, Marcus said carefully. The blood bond says otherwise, Gabriel interrupted. Permanent psychic connection, emotional entanglement, shared life force. Call it what you want, but you've mated with my cousin. That makes her our problem too. Elena's voice cut through the rising tension. Enough. All of you. She moved to the center of the barn, commanding attention through sheer presence. Sarah, Jake, Emma, come here. Sarah hesitated, then rose with her children. The blessed revolver remained in her hand, and she noticed several weapons track her movement. Look at them, Elena said to both groups. Really look. A mother protecting her children caught in a war they never asked for. Is this what we've become? Hunters who threaten babies? Wolves who abandon their pack leader when he shows mercy. Mercy is weakness, the scarred hunter said coldly. And weakness gets people killed. So does fanaticism, Elena shot back. Gabriel, You've lost sight of why the Martinez bloodline became hunters in the first place. We were protectors, guardians of the balance between human and supernatural worlds. We weren't exterminators. The world has changed, Aunt, Gabriel replied. The old ways, the old balance, it's not working anymore. Supernatural creatures are getting bolder, more aggressive. They're not hiding from humans, they're hunting them. Some are, Elena acknowledged. And those deserve death. But this pact protects human communities. They've kept worse things from moving into death's head territory for generations. At what cost? Asked one of Gabriel's hunters. How many humans have they killed over those generations? How much blood is on their hands? Sarah felt Marcus flinch through the bond, felt his memories of necessary violence, of humans who'd threatened the pack or innocent werewolves. The weight of an alpha's choices, the lives he'd taken to protect others. Less blood than you've spilled, Marcus said quietly. How many innocent werewolves has your society murdered, Hunter? How many families destroyed because they chose coexistence over conquest? We don't murder, Gabriel snarled. We execute justice. Whose justice? Sarah demanded, finding her voice. Who made you judge and jury over an entire species? Before Gabriel could answer, Jake made a small sound of distress. Sarah looked down to see her son's eyes flashing gold, just for a moment, but long enough for everyone in the barn to notice. The reaction was immediate. Hunters raised weapons, werewolves shifted into defensive positions, and Sarah found herself at the center of a powder keg ready to explode. Stand down. Elena's voice cracked like a whip. All of you, stand down. The boy is changing, Gabriel said, his rifle trained on Jake. If we don't act now, if you point that weapon at my son for one more second, I will put this blessed bullet through your skull, Sarah said with deadly calm. Gabriel's eyes met hers, and she saw him recognize something in her expression. The same hunter instincts that ran in his blood turned now against him in defense of her child. You would kill your own family for a monster's spawn? He asked. I would kill anyone who threatens my children, Sarah replied. Family or not. Emma, who had been silent through the entire confrontation, suddenly spoke up. Why is everyone being so mean? The innocent question cut through the tension like a knife. Sarah looked at her 8-year-old daughter, seeing the confusion and fear in her dark eyes. Because they're scared, baby, Sarah said softly. People do stupid things when they're scared. But Jake's not scary, Emma protested. He's just Jake. He helps me with my homework and shares his cookies and tells really good stories about dragons. Dragons? Marcus asked, a note of surprise in his voice. Emma nodded earnestly. He says he dreams about them sometimes. Big ones with golden eyes who protect people from bad things. Sarah felt Marcus's shock through the bond. Dragons were the stuff of werewolf legend, the original spirits that had gifted certain humans with the ability to shift. If Jake was dreaming of dragons, the bloodline runs true, Elena said quietly, understanding passing across her weathered features. Stronger than werewolf, stronger than hunter. He's manifesting something older. What does that mean? Sarah demanded. It means, said a new voice from the barn entrance, that the boy is more valuable than any of us realized. Everyone spun toward the speaker. A man stood silhouetted in the doorway, tall and lean with silver hair and eyes that seemed to catch light like a wolf's. But there was something different about him, something that made both hunters and werewolves step back instinctively. Counsel, Marcus said, and Sarah could hear the respect and wariness in his voice. The stranger stepped into the barn, and Sarah could see he wore neither hunter gear nor biker leather. Instead, he was dressed in simple clothes that somehow managed to look both timeless and expensive. Adrian Thorne, he introduced himself with a slight nod to Sarah. I represent certain interested parties. We've been monitoring this situation with growing concern. The boy is under pack protection, Marcus said firmly. And hunter jurisdiction, Gabriel added. Adrian smiled, and Sarah felt a chill run down her spine. Actually, he's under no one's jurisdiction. Children with dual heritage fall into a very specific legal gray area, one that requires council intervention. What council? Sarah demanded. The conclave, Elena answered, her voice heavy with dread. The ruling body that governs supernatural politics. They haven't intervened in American territory for 50 years. 53 to be precise, Adrian corrected. But recent events have forced our hand. A blood bond between hunter and werewolf, a child manifesting draconic traits, territorial wars escalating beyond acceptable parameters. The balance is shifting in ways that require immediate attention. Sarah pulled Jake closer, protective instincts flaring. You're not taking my son. I'm not here to take anyone, Adrian assured her. I'm here to offer a choice. All of you have decisions to make, decisions that will affect not just your own lives, but the future of supernatural politics in this entire region. He turned to Gabriel first. The Martinez hunters can continue their crusade of extermination, but it will mean war with every werewolf pack from here to the Canadian border. Are you prepared for that level of bloodshed? Gabriel's jaw clenched, but he didn't answer. Adrian faced Marcus next. The Death's Head pack can demand absolute loyalty from their alpha, but it will mean abandoning the woman who saved your leader's life and the children she's trying to protect. Are you prepared to sacrifice your honor for security? Several pack members shifted uncomfortably, but Kane spoke for them. The pack's survival comes first. It has to. And you, Adrian turned to Sarah, can try to fight both your heritage and your heart, but eventually you'll have to choose between the hunter blood in your veins and the werewolf bond in your soul. Which will you sacrifice? Sarah met his gaze steadily. I choose my children. Everything else is negotiable. Adrian nodded approvingly. Spoken like a true mother. But motherhood won't be enough to protect them from what's coming. What's coming? Elena asked. Change, Adrian replied simply. The old ways are dying, on both sides. Hunters who believe in genocide, werewolves who think humans are prey, rigid hierarchies that can't adapt to new realities. Your grandson represents evolution, Elena Martinez. The question is whether that evolution will be guided or left to run wild. Jake pressed closer to Sarah, his small hand finding hers. Through the blood bond, she felt Marcus's growing understanding of what the council representative was offering and what it would cost. What do you want from us? Marcus asked. Adrian smiled again, and this time there was something almost predatory in the expression. A demonstration. Proof that coexistence is possible, that hunter and werewolf can work together instead of trying to destroy each other. You've already begun the process with your blood bond. Now we need to see if you can complete it. Complete it how? Sarah demanded. By surviving the trial period, Adrian replied. 6 months of living together as a family unit while both communities watch. If you can make it work, if the children remain stable, if the pack accepts dual leadership, if the hunters acknowledge that cooperation serves their goals better than genocide, then the council will officially recognize your union and protect the children under conclave law. And if we can't make it work? Sarah asked, though she was afraid of the answer. Then the current conflicts continue until one side or the other is destroyed, Adrian said simply. The hunters will wage war on every werewolf pack in the region. The werewolves will hunt down every Martinez descendant they can find. And your children will be caught in the crossfire until someone decides their mixed heritage makes them too dangerous to live. The barn fell silent except for the sound of Emma's quiet breathing and Jake's rapidly beating heart. Sarah looked around at the assembled groups. Hunters who saw her as a traitor, werewolves who saw her as a threat to their alpha, and her children who just wanted their family to be safe. Through the blood bond, she felt Marcus's resolution solidifying. He would choose her and the children over pack politics, even if it meant losing everything he'd built. I accept, Sarah said before anyone could stop her. 6 months. We'll prove that this can work. Gabriel's rifle swung toward her. You don't speak for the Martinez bloodline. She speaks for herself, Elena said firmly, stepping between her granddaughter and the weapon. And that's enough. Marcus moved to stand beside Sarah, his hand finding her shoulder in a gesture of support and possession. The Death's Head pack accepts the trial period. The hell we do, Kane protested. Alpha, this is insane. You're gambling everything on. On hope, Marcus finished. On the possibility that there's a better way than endless war. Hope doesn't keep the pack safe, Torch argued. Neither does fear, Sarah said quietly. I grew up afraid of my grandmother's stories, of my own instincts, of truths I wasn't ready to handle. Fear made me weak. It made all of us weak. She looked around the barn, meeting the eyes of hunters and werewolves alike. We can keep fighting the same battles our parents and grandparents fought. We can keep killing each other over ancient grudges and territorial disputes. Or we can try something new. And if it fails? Kane asked. Then we'll deal with that when it happens, Sarah replied. But at least we'll have tried. Adrian nodded slowly. The trial period begins now. You have 6 months to prove that hunter and werewolf can create a stable family unit, that mixed heritage children can survive and thrive, and that cooperation serves both communities better than conflict. He turned to leave, then paused. One more thing. Other packs will hear about this. Other hunter families too. You won't just be proving yourselves to your own people. You'll be setting a precedent that could change supernatural politics forever. No pressure. With that cheerful observation, Adrian Thorne walked out of the barn, leaving behind two groups of people who weren't sure if they'd just witnessed the beginning of a new era or the end of the old ways. Sarah looked down at Jake, whose eyes had returned to their normal brown but still held flecks of gold when the light hit them right. Her son, Marcus's nephew, a child who carried the blood of hunters and werewolves and possibly something even older. "Are we going to be okay, Mama?" Jake asked quietly. Sarah squeezed his hand, feeling Marcus's strength through their bond, seeing the fierce determination in Elena's weathered face. "We're going to try, baby. That's all anyone can do." Outside the barn, she could hear engines starting as hunters and werewolves began to disperse. Some were leaving permanently, unwilling to be part of whatever came next. Others were taking positions around the property, settling in for a siege that might last 6 months. But for the first time since this all began, Sarah felt something like hope. They had a chance, slim, dangerous, and dependent on 100 variables outside their control, but still a chance. She had 6 months to build a family out of werewolves and hunters, to raise children who belonged to both worlds and neither, and to prove that love could be stronger than centuries of hatred. It should have been impossible. But then again, so was everything else that had happened since she'd found a dying werewolf on her doorstep. Chapter 8. 6 months after the tribunal, Sarah Martinez Kellerman stood in her kitchen making lunch for 12 and trying not to let anyone see her hands shake. Not from fear. Those days were mostly behind her, but from the secret she'd been carrying for 3 weeks now. The secret that would change everything, again, just when they'd finally found their balance. Outside the window, she could see Jake sparring with Razor in the converted barn, his movements fluid and controlled in ways that still took her breath away. At 10 years old now, he moved like a dancer or a predator, depending on the light. His abilities had stabilized beautifully under Marcus's guidance, the werewolf and hunter blood in his system finding harmony instead of conflict. "Mama, Katie's trying to eat my math homework," Emma called from the living room, her voice holding the long-suffering patience of an 11-year-old dealing with supernatural houseguests. Sarah smiled, wiping her hands on her apron. Katie was a young werewolf who'd shown up at their door 3 months ago, barely 16 and running from a pack that wanted her dead for refusing an arranged mating. She'd been living in wolf form for so long that she'd almost forgotten how to be human. "Katie, sweetie, paper isn't food," Sarah called out. "Remember what we practiced about human behavior?" A guilty whine drifted from the living room, followed by Emma's gentle coaching. "It's okay, Katie. Just spit it out. See? Much better." Sarah shook her head, still amazed at how naturally her daughter had adapted to their new reality. Emma treated their supernatural houseguests like slightly confused relatives who needed patient instruction in basic human customs. She'd become their unofficial ambassador to normal life, teaching everything from table manners to social media etiquette. The kitchen door swung open and Marcus stepped inside, his arms full of firewood despite the spring warmth. Even after 6 months of domestic life, he still moved with the predatory grace that had first caught her attention. But now there was something gentler in his golden eyes, a contentment that hadn't been there during their early days. "Council inspection is scheduled for next week," he said, setting the wood by the fireplace. "Adrian wants to see how the neutral ground initiative is working out." Sarah nodded, trying to keep her expression neutral. The farm had indeed become something unique in the supernatural world, a safe haven where werewolves running from abusive packs could find shelter, where young hunters questioning their family's extremist views could learn that coexistence was possible. They currently had 7 residents besides their own family: Katie the young werewolf, twin brothers who'd been kicked out of their pack for being gay, an elderly hunter who'd been cast out for refusing to kill werewolf children, a teenage girl whose hunter family had disowned her for dating a vampire, and 2 werewolves who'd been tortured by rogue hunters and needed time to heal. It shouldn't have worked. The logistics alone were nightmarish: different dietary needs, territorial instincts, centuries of ingrained hatred. But somehow it did work. Love and patience and Emma's innocent acceptance had created something that the supernatural world had thought impossible. "Any word from Gabriel?" Sarah asked, though she wasn't sure she wanted to know. Marcus's expression darkened. "Still gathering followers. Razor's contacts say he's formed his own splinter group, calling themselves the True Hunters. They've been hitting werewolf communities across 3 states. Sarah's hand drifted unconsciously to her still flat belly. Gabriel's extremist faction had declared her and her family traitors to the human race. They'd made it clear that any children from her union with Marcus would be considered abominations to be eliminated. "We'll handle it," Marcus said quietly, moving behind her and wrapping his arms around her waist. Through their blood bond, she felt his love and protectiveness, but also his growing concern about the threats gathering against their unconventional family. "I know," Sarah murmured, leaning back against his chest. "It's just—" "Sarah," Jake's voice called from the doorway, interrupting her thoughts. "There's someone here to see you." Her son stood in the kitchen doorway and Sarah's breath caught. Over the past 6 months, Jake had grown several inches and filled out with lean muscle. His dark hair was longer now, and his eyes held flecks of gold that seemed to shift in the light. He was becoming something beautiful and dangerous, a bridge between two worlds that had been at war for centuries. But right now he looked worried. "Who is it, baby?" Sarah asked. "A hunter," Jake replied. "But not like Gabriel's people. She smells sad. And scared. And she's alone." Sarah and Marcus exchanged glances. Lone hunters seeking them out usually meant one of two things. Either someone looking to join their cause, or someone sent to infiltrate their operation. They walked to the front porch together, their extended family gathering behind them with the instinctive protectiveness that had developed over months of shared danger. Sarah counted heads automatically. All their residents were accounted for, ready to defend their sanctuary if needed. The woman waiting by the gate was young, maybe 25, with short blonde hair and the kind of scars that spoke of extensive combat training. She wore hunter gear, tactical vest, blessed silver weapons, but her posture was defeated rather than threatening. "Sarah Martinez Kellerman?" she called out, her voice carrying across the yard. "I'm Sarah," she replied, not moving from the porch. "What do you want?" The woman held up her hands, showing empty palms. "My name is Lisa Chin. I was part of Gabriel's group. I need help." Sarah felt Marcus tense beside her, felt the pack's readiness for violence through their bond. Gabriel's followers were considered shoot-on-sight threats to their community. "Help with what?" Sarah asked carefully. "Getting away from them," Lisa replied, and her voice broke on the words. "I thought Gabriel was right, that werewolves were monsters that needed to be destroyed. But then I saw what his purification really meant. The families he's slaughtering, the children." She stopped, wiping tears from her face. "There was a pack in Montana, peaceful werewolves who ran a wildlife preserve. Gabriel said they were a threat to human hunters in the area. We went in expecting to find killers and found a daycare center instead." Sarah's blood chilled. Through the bond, she felt Marcus's rage building, felt the pack's barely controlled desire for vengeance. "How many?" Marcus asked, his voice deadly quiet. 37, Lisa whispered. "Including 14 children under the age of 10. Gabriel called it necessary cleansing. Said we were preventing future monsters." The silence that followed was deafening. Sarah looked at this young woman who'd been part of genocide and saw something she recognized. The hollow eyes of someone whose world had been shattered by truth. "Why come here?" Sarah asked. "Why not just disappear?" "Because Gabriel's hunting me now," Lisa replied. "He says I'm compromised, that I've been seduced by werewolf lies. He's put a kill order out on any hunter who questions his methods." "And you think we'll protect you?" Marcus asked, skepticism clear in his voice. "I think you're the only ones who can," Lisa said simply. "You've built something here that proves Gabriel wrong. Hunter and werewolf living together, protecting each other. If that's possible, maybe redemption is possible too." Sarah studied the young woman's face, seeing desperation and genuine remorse. But also seeing the potential for this to be an elaborate trap. "Take off your weapons," she said finally. Lisa complied without hesitation, removing blessed silver knives, a rifle, and what looked like a handful of supernatural tracking devices. She placed them all on the ground and stepped back. "Jake," Sarah called to her son. "What do you sense?" Jake approached Lisa with the careful confidence he'd developed over months of training. His nostrils flared slightly as he circled her, reading sense and body language in ways that still amazed Sarah. "She's telling the truth about being scared," he said finally, "and about running from other hunters. But there's something else, something she's not telling us." Lisa's face crumpled. "I have information," she said, "about Gabriel's next target, about the weapons he's building, the alliances he's making with other extremist groups. I want to trade that information for sanctuary." "What's the target?" Marcus asked. "This place," Lisa replied. "He's planning a coordinated strike for next month. Not just hunters, He's convinced some military contacts that you're a terrorist cell. They're going to come in with everything. Sarah felt her world tilt. The safety they'd built, the sanctuary they'd created for supernatural refugees, was about to become a war zone. How many? She asked. At least 100. Maybe more. Gabriel's been recruiting from military units that specialize in supernatural threats. Through the bond, Sarah felt Marcus's tactical mind racing, calculating odds and escape routes. But she also felt his determination to protect what they'd built, no matter the cost. There's more, Lisa continued. Gabriel knows about the Neutral Ground Initiative. He knows other supernatural communities are watching to see if your model works. He wants to destroy it spectacularly, make an example that will discourage anyone else from trying coexistence. Sarah's hand drifted to her belly again, thinking of the life growing there. A child conceived in love between species that had been enemies for millennia. The ultimate symbol of what they were trying to build. We need to evacuate the residents, Marcus said quietly. Get them to safety before. No, Sarah interrupted, surprising herself with the firmness in her voice. We don't run. Sarah, be reasonable. Against those numbers. I am being reasonable, she said, turning to face him. We run now, and we'll be running forever. Gabriel will hunt down every person we've helped, every supernatural being who believed in what we were trying to build. And then he'll come for our family. She looked around at their extended household. Werewolves and hunters who'd found peace together, children learning that love was stronger than ancient hatred. Besides, she added, her voice dropping to barely above a whisper, I can't travel right now. Marcus's eyes sharpened, and through their bond she felt his sudden understanding. Sarah, are you? She nodded, unable to keep the smile from her face despite the danger closing around them. 3 weeks along. I wanted to wait until after the council inspection to tell everyone. The joy that flooded through their bond was so intense it made her knees weak. Marcus caught her against his chest, his face buried in her hair as he processed what this meant. A baby. Their baby. Conceived in love and hope, carrying the blood of hunters and werewolves and whatever Jake's dragon dreams represented. We protect this, Marcus said fiercely, his hand covering hers on her belly. All of it. The family, the sanctuary, the future we're building. Damn right we do, Sarah agreed. She turned to Lisa, who was watching their exchange with something like wonder on her face. You want redemption? Here's your chance. Help us prepare for Gabriel's attack. Lisa nodded eagerly. What do you need? Everything, Sarah replied. Troop movements, weapon specifications, timing approach routes. And more importantly, we need to get word to our allies. If Gabriel wants to make this a symbol, then we make sure it's the right kind of symbol. Over the next hour, their kitchen became a war room. Lisa provided detailed intelligence about Gabriel's forces while Marcus contacted allied packs, and Elena reached out to moderate hunter families who'd grown disgusted with extremist tactics. The picture that emerged was daunting but not hopeless. Gabriel had superior numbers and military-grade weapons, but Sarah's people had something he didn't: supernatural abilities and the desperate motivation of those protecting their home. The attack comes at dawn, Lisa explained, sketching rough maps on Emma's homework papers. Gabriel wants maximum visibility. He's got media contacts who'll frame it as a heroic raid on a terrorist compound. Let them, Sarah said grimly. The world needs to see what his heroism really looks like. As evening fell, their residents gathered in the living room for what had become their daily family meeting. Sarah looked around at the faces, some scarred by violence, all marked by the kind of hope that came from finding belonging after years of rejection. There's going to be trouble, she announced without preamble. Big trouble. Anyone who wants to leave has our blessing and our help getting to safety. No one moved. This is our home, said David, one of the gay werewolf twins. The first place that's ever felt like home. We're not abandoning it. Murmurs of agreement filled the room. Sarah felt tears prick her eyes as she looked at these brave souls who'd found family in the most unlikely place. Then we fight, Marcus said simply. Not for territory or dominance or ancient grudges. We fight for the right to exist, to love who we choose, to build something better than what came before. Together, added Elena, who'd moved in permanently after the tribunal to help with the supernatural refugees. Hunter and werewolf side by side. As the meeting broke up and their extended family prepared for what might be their last night together, Sarah found herself on the front porch with Marcus, looking out at the peaceful farmyard where children had played and former enemies had learned to trust each other. Do you think we can win? She asked quietly. I think we can survive, Marcus replied. And survival is sometimes victory enough. Sarah nodded, her hand resting on her still flat belly. Inside her, new life was growing. A child who would never know a world where hunter and werewolf couldn't love each other, couldn't build a family together. "What should we name the baby?" she asked. Marcus smiled, and in the golden light of sunset, his eyes held all the warmth and hope she'd fallen in love with. "Hope," he said simply. "If it's a girl, we name her Hope. And if it's a boy?" "David," Marcus replied without hesitation. "After my brother. Jake's father deserves to be remembered." They sat in comfortable silence, watching the sun set over their sanctuary. In the distance, Sarah could see movement in the treeline, watchers, waiting, planning. Gabriel's people, or worse, preparing for the battle to come. But here, in this moment, surrounded by the family they'd built from love and determination and sheer stubborn hope, Sarah felt peace. Whatever tomorrow brought, they'd face it together. The supernatural world was changing, one unconventional family at a time. And if they could survive what was coming, if they could prove that love really was stronger than hatred, then maybe, just maybe, they could change it forever. In the growing darkness, golden eyes watched from the shadows of the barn as Jake practiced his defensive forms, his movements flowing between human martial arts and something far older. Emma sat nearby, reading to Katie in patient, gentle tones as the young werewolf struggled with human language. This was home. This was family. This was worth fighting for. And in a month, when Gabriel's forces came for them, they would discover just how fiercely a pack could defend what it loved. Epilogue. 2 years later, Sarah Kellerman stood at her kitchen window, watching her son Tommy chase fireflies in the twilight with his little sister Hope toddling after him on unsteady legs. At 10 years old now, Tommy moved with the fluid grace that marked him as something more than human, but the gentle way he slowed down for 2-year-old Hope showed he was still very much a child at heart. "Careful, Hope," Emma called from the porch swing where she was reading to Katie, who'd grown from a traumatized 16-year-old werewolf into a confident young woman studying veterinary medicine online. At 13, Emma had become the unofficial big sister to every supernatural refugee who'd found sanctuary on their farm. Sarah smiled, her hand resting on her rounded belly where their second child, another miracle, was growing strong. The morning sickness had finally passed, and she was enjoying the peaceful energy of her second trimester. "Mama, watch," Tommy called out, his brown eyes flashing gold as he moved with supernatural speed to catch a particularly elusive firefly. He held it gently in his cupped hands for a moment before opening them and letting it fly free. Even at 10, he understood that his strength came with the responsibility to protect things smaller and more fragile than himself. The blood bond with Marcus pulsed with warmth and contentment as she felt him approaching from the barn. 2 years of marriage had only deepened their connection, and she could sense his emotions as clearly as her own. His fierce love for their growing family, his pride in what they'd built together, and his constant vigilance against the threats that still circled their unconventional home. Marcus appeared in the kitchen doorway, his hair damp from the shower and his golden eyes soft with domestic happiness. The man who could command the absolute loyalty of 50 werewolf bikers was reduced to putty in the hands of a toddler who'd inherited his supernatural strength and her stubborn Martinez determination. "Hope's getting faster," he observed, settling behind Sarah and wrapping his arms around her waist. "Yesterday she outran 3 of the pack members during training." Sarah laughed. "She's not even walking steadily yet, and she's already giving grown werewolves a run for their money. What's going to happen when she actually learns to run?" "We're going to have our hands full," Marcus replied, but his voice was warm with pride. Hope had been born with abilities that surprised even the council. Werewolf strength and speed, hunter instincts, and something else that reminded Sarah of Tommy's dragon dreams. Through the window, they watched Tommy demonstrate proper firefly-catching technique to his little sister, who clapped her hands in delight and babbled something that sounded suspiciously like pretty lights in perfect werewolf pack language. "Speaking of having our hands full," Marcus said, his voice taking on a more serious tone, "Adrian called this morning. The council's officially recognizing our sanctuary as neutral territory. No more trial period, no more proving ourselves. We're legitimate." Sarah turned in his arms, seeing the relief and satisfaction in his expression. 2 years ago, they'd been fighting for the right to exist as a family. Now they were pioneering a new model for supernatural coexistence that was being replicated across the country. "And Gabriel?" she asked, though she wasn't sure she wanted to know. Marcus's expression darkened slightly. "Still out there, but his support is crumbling. After what happened during his attack on us, most moderate hunters turned against his methods. He's down to maybe a dozen fanatics, and they're being hunted by both the Hunter Society and werewolf packs. Sarah nodded, remembering that terrible dawn 2 years ago when Gabriel had come with his small army to destroy everything they'd built. The battle had been brief but brutal, and had ended with Gabriel's forces in full retreat after witnessing what happened when hunters and werewolves fought side by side to protect their home. The media attention afterward had been intense, but it had worked in their favor. Images of supernatural beings protecting human children, of former enemies working together against extremists, had shifted public opinion in ways that years of careful politics couldn't have achieved. Elena's book comes out next month, Sarah said, changing to a happier subject. She's already got interview requests from 3 major news networks. Marcus chuckled. Your grandmother's going to be the most famous hunter in the world. Bridges Not Walls, A Hunter's Guide to Supernatural Coexistence. It has a nice ring to it. Elena Martinez had become something of a celebrity in supernatural circles, using her decades of experience and natural authority to advocate for peaceful cooperation between species. At 80, she was busier than ever, traveling to speak at conferences and helping establish other sanctuary communities. Tommy, hope time to come in, Sarah called through the window. Bath time for little ones, homework time for big ones. Tommy scooped up his sister with practiced ease, making her giggle as he spun her around. Hope's laughter was infectious, and Sarah felt her heart swell with love for this incredible family they'd created against all odds. As they prepared for the evening routine, baths, homework, bedtime stories that often featured dragons and wise werewolves, Sarah reflected on how much had changed since that snowy night when she'd found Marcus bleeding on her doorstep. The farm had evolved into something beyond what any of them had imagined. What had started as a desperate attempt to save one werewolf's life had become a thriving community that housed nearly 30 supernatural refugees at any given time. They had a school now where human and supernatural children learned together. They had a medical clinic where Sarah used her training to help beings that regular hospitals couldn't or wouldn't treat. They had a legal aid office run by a former hunter who'd become an expert in supernatural rights law. Most importantly, they had hope. Children like Tommy and Hope, who would grow up knowing that love could bridge any divide, that families came in all forms, and that being different was something to celebrate rather than fear. Mama, Tommy said as Sarah tucked him into bed, David wants to know if you'll tell him about his daddy tonight. Sarah's breath caught. David, the youngest of their current residents, a 7-year-old werewolf whose parents had been killed by Gabriel's people, had been having nightmares again. Tommy, with his gift for sensing emotional distress in both humans and supernatural beings, had become the child's unofficial big brother and protector. Of course, sweetheart, Sarah replied, brushing Tommy's dark hair back from his forehead. Why don't you ask Uncle Razor to tell David the story about the great wolves who watch over lost cubs from the stars? Tommy's eyes lit up. Razor, Marcus's lieutenant, had proven to have an unexpected talent for storytelling, weaving werewolf legends into comforting bedtime tales for traumatized children. And Tommy, Sarah added softly, you know your daddy David is watching over you from those same stars, right? He and your biological father both loved you very much, even though they never got to meet you. Tommy nodded seriously. They'd explained his parentage to him the previous year, when his abilities had stabilized enough for him to understand the complexities of his heritage. He'd taken it with the matter-of-fact acceptance that seemed to be his superpower, the ability to love without conditions, to accept family in all its forms. I know, Mama. I can feel them sometimes, when I'm dreaming about dragons. They tell me I'm doing good, protecting the little ones and helping you and Marcus keep everyone safe. Sarah kissed his forehead, marveling once again at the wisdom this child carried. Sweet dreams, my brave boy. Tomorrow's the full moon gathering, so we'll have lots of new friends visiting. The monthly full moon gatherings had become legendary in supernatural circles. Werewolf packs from across the region would converge on their farm, along with hunters, vampires, and other supernatural beings who'd heard about the sanctuary where differences were celebrated rather than feared. It was part festival, part diplomatic summit, part family reunion. Children who'd never seen others like themselves got to play together. Adults shared resources and information. Old enemies learned to work together for the common good. Sarah made her way downstairs, where Marcus was giving Hope her bottle while Emma finished her algebra homework at the kitchen table. The domestic normalcy of the scene still took her breath away sometimes. This was the life she'd dreamed of but never dared hope for. "How's our little mathematician doing?" Sarah asked Emma, settling beside her daughter at the table. "Better," Emma replied, showing her work. "Katie's been helping me with the advanced stuff. Did you know Werewolf pack mathematics is actually really sophisticated? They have to calculate territory boundaries, resource allocation, hierarchical structures." Sarah smiled. Emma had developed a fascination with the academic side of supernatural studies and was already talking about becoming a supernatural anthropologist when she grew up. Several universities had expressed interest in establishing supernatural studies programs, with Emma as their inspiration. "Speaking of pack mathematics," Marcus said, shifting hope to his shoulder for burping, "we need to talk about expansion again. We've got a waiting list of 43 individuals seeking sanctuary, and we're at capacity." Sarah nodded. It was a good problem to have, but still a problem. They'd already converted the old barn into dormitory-style housing, built additional cabins in the woods, and expanded their infrastructure to accommodate their growing community. "What about the Morrison property?" Emma suggested, not looking up from her homework. "It's been empty since old Mr. Morrison died, and it borders our land on the east side." Sarah and Marcus exchanged glances. Their 13-year-old daughter's strategic mind never ceased to amaze them. The Morrison farm would indeed be perfect. Another 200 acres with existing buildings that could be renovated. "I'll call the realtor tomorrow," Marcus decided. "The council's been talking about providing funding for sanctuary expansion. This could be our pilot project." A comfortable quiet settled over the kitchen as Emma finished her homework and Marcus got hope settled for sleep. Sarah found herself thinking about the path that had brought them here. The choices made in desperation that had led to something beautiful. The blood bond with Marcus pulsed with contentment as he returned from putting hope in her crib. 2 years of marriage, 2 children, and a community that depended on them, and they were stronger than ever. "Penny for your thoughts," Marcus said, settling beside her at the table. "Just thinking about that first night," Sarah replied. "When I found you bleeding in the snow. If someone had told me then that we'd end up here, you'd have thought they were crazy," Marcus finished with a smile. "A hunter and a werewolf, raising children together, running a supernatural sanctuary. It sounds impossible even now. But it works," Sarah said, her hand finding his across the table. "Against all odds, against all logic, it works." Through the kitchen window, she could see lights in the various buildings scattered across their property. The dormitories where their residents lived, the school where tomorrow's lessons would cover everything from calculus to supernatural law, the clinic where she'd spent the afternoon treating a young vampire's silver burns. This was home. This was family. This was proof that love really could conquer fear, that understanding could triumph over hatred, that the future could be brighter than the past. "I love you, Sarah Kellerman," Marcus said quietly, his golden eyes warm with affection. "Thank you for saving my life." "Thank you for letting me," Sarah replied, bringing his hand to her lips for a gentle kiss. "All of it. The blood bond, the children, this community we've built. Thank you for showing me that home isn't a place. It's the people who choose to love each other despite everything that should keep them apart." Outside, the full moon was rising, casting silver light across their sanctuary. In the distance, Sarah could hear the sound of motorcycles approaching. Early arrivals for tomorrow's gathering, seeking the safety and acceptance they'd found nowhere else. Soon their quiet kitchen would be filled with laughter and conversation in a dozen languages, human and supernatural. Children would run through the halls, playing games that bridged the gap between species. Adults would share stories and resources, planning for a future where their differences were strengths rather than weaknesses. But for now, it was just the two of them, surrounded by the sleeping sounds of their children and the peaceful quiet of a community at rest. Sarah's hand moved to her belly, where their next miracle was growing, and she smiled at the thought of the world this child would inherit. A world where werewolves and hunters could fall in love, where supernatural beings and humans could live side by side, where family was defined by love rather than blood. The future was bright with possibility, and they would face it together, pack, family, and hope incarnate. In the distance, a wolf howled at the moon, and from somewhere in the house, Tommy's sleepy voice answered in perfect werewolf song, adding his young voice to the ancient music of the pack. Home, Sarah thought, listening to her son sing to the night. This is what home sounds like. The end. Thank you for listening to this story. Like, share, and subscribe for more.